Today we're going to talk about why your ex-girlfriend never initiates contact with you and what you can do to change that. But before we focus in intensely on your ex-girlfriend initiating contact, the first thing you should do is first figure out whether or not you even have a chance of getting your ex-girlfriend back. Now, luckily for you, on my website, www.exgirlfriendrecovery.com, I've put together a special quiz designed to answer these very questions. All you have to do is simply look in the description link below this video and click it if you want to take that quiz. Okay, now let's focus on why your ex-girlfriend never initiates contact. And what I find fascinating about this question is the fact that really I talk to a lot of women trying to get their ex-boyfriends back all day long. And one of their most asked questions is, why doesn't he ever reach out to me first? So what we have here is a situation where both parties, both male and female, want their exes to reach out first to them. So why aren't they? Well, in my experience, there are three primary reasons for why an ex-girlfriend will not reach out to you first. Reason number one, the quality of your previous conversations. So imagine this for a moment. You and your ex-girlfriend are talking back and forth, and she is enjoying the conversations. You can typically tell that she enjoys the conversations based on her word count and text messages, and also the topics that you're talking about. They're not just shallow, there's a little bit more depth to them. So ultimately, when you're looking at your ex-girlfriend and her enjoying the conversations, it makes sense logically that she would want to continue to have the conversation another time. She'll want to talk to you again. Now, let's compare that to someone who goes through a breakup with their ex-girlfriend. And their ex-girlfriend and them don't really have a lot of great conversations at the end. In fact, most of the conversations are versed with fights and arguments about who did what wrong. All the time that she thinks back on your previous conversations, the latest ones that you just had, she's left with this feeling of dread and doesn't feel very good inside. And perhaps that could explain a reason why she doesn't want to reach out to you first. She doesn't want to continue to have those types of conversations. But the other thing that you really need to keep in mind when it comes to quality of conversations is that oftentimes as human beings, we have horrible memories. In other words, we can't remember what the conversations were like 4 or 5 years ago, but we can remember the conversations that we most recently had. And there's a bit of that involved in the quality of conversation. So if your most recent conversation with your ex-girlfriend was fraught with lies or fighting or arguments or something that makes her feel bad inside, that is what she is going to remember. It's sort of the mentality of, what have you done for me lately? Reason number two, how did the previous conversation end? So what's really funny is that I'm working with a one-on-one coaching client right now that is a female. She's trying to get her ex-boyfriend back. And we finally got to the point where she's talking to him on the phone. And she built up all of this anticipation about talking to him on the phone. And now that she's finally on the phone with him, she's had two pretty good conversations. The first one went perfectly. It was about 15 minutes long, and she did exactly what I told her to do. She ended the conversation first. The second phone call was really good as well, but something interesting happened. He ended the conversation first. And he did it in this really clever way. So basically, they're having this 10-minute long conversation, and she's starting to get into it. She's building up the anticipation of maybe having a talk about their previous relationship, because that is something that she wanted to do with him. And then all of a sudden, he says, you know what, I have to go for work. And of course, she's disappointed, and she says, well, okay. But he ends the conversation like this: don't worry, you'll be hearing from me. Hang up. Now, initially she's ecstatic because, well, he ended the conversation first, but he said he would be contacting her first. It's been a week and he has not contacted, and she's been driving herself crazy about the fact that he's not contacted her yet and what's going on in his head. And yesterday when I had my phone call with her, The one thing that we talked about was this concept of why he said this and what may be going on in his head. And ultimately, I pointed out to her that this is the exact thing that we teach our clients to do to their exes, to end the conversation a bit prematurely on purpose. Because if you do, it creates this cliffhanger, and the cliffhanger makes you want to continue the conversation. And I pointed out to her and I basically said, look how effective it is on you. This is why we teach it, because it can make you want to reach out to him first. And believe me when I say she wants to reach out to him first. It's taking everything I have to say, no, just wait for him to reach out to you first. So the lesson that we learn here is that if you end your conversation, especially after a quality conversation, with a bit of a cliffhanger, it can create this anticipation where your ex-girlfriend is going to want to reach out to you first to continue said conversation. Now, this is also described through a psychological technique that I have often championed here on ex-girlfriend recovery called the Zeigarnik effect. Basically, it's this technique that states that people remember interrupted or incomplete tasks better than completed ones. Well, talking on the phone and then suddenly having to go is what we would call, or what would satisfy as, an incomplete task. In other words, it's going to stay in the forefront of your mind and you feel like there's still unfinished business. And that unfinished business can sometimes make us feel a little wrong inside, like we need to get that closure, we need to close that loop. The best example I can give to you is if you invited me into your house and instead of closing the door as I walked into your house, I left it open. All sorts of things can happen then. You're thinking, I need to close that door throughout the entire interaction that we have inside of your house. But every time you go to close that door, I prevent you from doing so. I pull you over to this area of your house, but that door is still open. What if bugs get in? What if a robber comes in? Your mind goes crazy, and next thing you know, you just can't help it. You have to go close the door because it feels normal. It feels complete. Reason number 3, you develop a pattern where she reaches out to you first consistently. So one of my favorite pieces of knowledge is something I like to call the Benjamin Franklin effect. You'd initially think that when favors are doled out, if you do someone a favor, they're more likely to do another favor for you. But the Benjamin Franklin effect kind of goes against the grain. In other words, if someone does you a favor, they're more likely to do you another favor. And ultimately, I think this is just focusing on patterns as a whole. In other words, if you establish a pattern, you're more likely to continue to stick to that pattern. So let's say that you and your ex-girlfriend have a really high quality conversation that you end a bit prematurely in a nice way. Let's say that you use the excuse that my client's ex used on her. Oh hey, work is calling, I have to go. And then every single time you have another conversation, even if you're the one to reach out first, you find yourself ending the conversation first. And that pattern continues, and eventually your ex-girlfriend reaches out to you first. And then you notice it happens again and again and again. And next thing you know, your ex-girlfriend is in this pattern of reaching out to you first. Now, too many men have this false belief that there's some magic phrase or magic technique that you can use to automatically make your ex-girlfriend reach out to you first. But the truth is that there's not really such a thing. Ultimately, if you want her to reach out to you first, you need to achieve the 3 things we just talked about. You need to have quality conversations with her. You need to end the conversation kind of at the high point when it's getting good, a little bit prematurely. And you also need to establish a pattern where she's reaching out to you first. So they kind of work as building blocks. So imagine it like this. You have a quality conversation with your ex-girlfriend and you end the conversation first, a bit prematurely, so that there's an open loop, something that's unfinished. This causes her to reach out to you first. So you reach out and then you have another conversation again. This works especially great on the phone. So you're on the phone, you end the conversation first, and then she reaches out to you again the next day. And you just continue this pattern over and over and over again. Next thing you know, she's wondering why you're not reaching out first and coming to my website, Ex-Boyfriend Recovery, figuring that out. The truth is that if you want your ex-girlfriend to reach out to you first, if you want her to initiate contact, that's a right that you have to earn. You have to put the work in. Now, this also brings up a really interesting question. Why is it that women expect men to reach out to them first? Because I can guarantee you, I've dealt with a lot more women than I've dealt with men throughout my career. And all women always obsess about the same thing that this video is about. Why isn't he reaching out to me first? And this tells us something interesting about their psyche. Ultimately, the stereotype of courting still exists in our society. Women do expect men to be the ones to initiate. They expect them to be the ones to ask the women out on the date. They expect them to be the ones to kind of put the effort in. And while it is 2020, and while things have changed a lot, sometimes stereotypes still hold true. And it's important that you keep this in mind because it's not the end of the world if you can't get your ex-girlfriend to reach out to you first. In the end, what matters more than anything from what I have seen is who ends conversations as opposed to who begins them. Hey there, thank you so much for getting to the end of this video. If you haven't already taken that quiz that will help you understand what kind of chance you have of getting your ex-girlfriend back, all you gotta do is simply look in the description link below and click the link you see there. Also, if you haven't liked, commented, or subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do so. Every little bit helps. I'll see you next time.